Rain hammered my windshield, drumming like 1,000 tiny fists. I gripped the wheel too tightly, my hands aching. But it didn't matter. The road ahead was still a black ribbon drowning in water. The wipers screeched back and forth, clearing my view for a heartbeat before the world smeared again into silver and grey. I hadn't seen another car in hours. No headlights behind me, no taillights ahead. Just me, the storm, and a highway that refused to end. The fuel light glowed red. It had been glowing far too long. Next exit, I whispered to myself. Next light. Next sign. But there were no signs, no exits, no stations. Just endless asphalt and the hiss of my tires slicing through puddles. My phone was useless. It lay on the passenger seat, a cold, dead weight. No bars, no GPS, no map. The last time I tried the radio, it gave me nothing but static, and then, faintly, a voice. It didn't sound right. The words blurred, like an old broadcast from another time. I thought I caught the phrase, "accident on the highway," before it dissolved again into crackle. That was enough. I shut it off. Silence was safer. The tires hissed, then for a second the sound changed. Hollow, wrong. My chest tightened. I slowed down, but the rhythm returned to normal. Maybe it was the rain. Maybe it was me. I leaned forward, nose nearly touching the glass. The headlights tunneled through the storm, but beyond that tunnel was nothing. Just black, just forever. I told myself not to think about it, not to think about the brakes screaming, about a sudden blinding light, about the jolt of impact. I told myself it was only fatigue. I hadn't slept more than a few hours in days. My mind was playing tricks, that was all. Still, the thought gnawed at me. The fuel light blinked again, brighter this time. If I run out here, I'm finished, I thought. Alone in the storm, in the middle of nowhere. No one to call, no one to help. And then, light. A glow through the rain. At first I thought I imagined it, but it grew stronger as I drove. Neon, sickly red and blue against the storm. The words sharpened into view. Roadhouse, open. The O flickered like it was fighting to stay alive. The word open pulsed steady, confident. Relief hit me like air after drowning. Finally, I breathed. The roadhouse rose out of the dark, as if it had been waiting for me. The parking lot spread wide, filled with cars. My chest loosened. People. There had to be people. But then I slowed, squinting through the rain. The cars were wrong. Their shapes were old, bulky. Colors I hadn't seen in decades. Avocado green, mustard yellow, a pale rust brown. My headlights slid over chrome and peeling paint. Rust ate through the fenders. Tires sagged flat against the asphalt. Plates were so old the numbers had almost worn away. Not one engine running, not one wiper moving. They looked staged, abandoned, frozen in time. My own silver car looked alien among them, too new, too alive. I pulled into a space near the entrance. The neon buzzed overhead, flickering in tired rhythm. Through the glass doors I saw light and the faint glow of a jukebox. I left the engine running and sat for a moment, waiting, watching. No one came out. The cars sat silent, their windows blind. I glanced at the door. I thought I saw my reflection in the glass, but it didn't line up, off by half an inch. I blinked, and it was fine again. Food, coffee, ask about gas, I told myself. Saying it out loud made it real, like a plan I could hold on to. I shut off the engine. Silence pressed against me, heavier than the storm. I opened the door and rain slid down my neck, cold needles under my collar. I jogged to the entrance, pulling my jacket tighter. The handle was warm, too warm, as if someone had just touched it. I froze, glanced back at the lot. Rows of cars stared back at me, lifeless, rain crawling down their windshields. No movement, no breath. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Warm air wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. The smell of fried food, coffee, and something sweet. The jukebox played a slow, old tune I almost recognized. Almost. Vinyl booths lined the room, red and cream. A counter stretched along one side with chrome stools. A glass pie case sat fogged and empty. The whole place felt like a memory I didn't remember making. "Evening," I called. My voice felt too loud, like I'd shouted in a church. No answer, but the room didn't feel empty. It felt like it was holding its breath. The door shut behind me with a soft click. I jumped, turning back. The neon blinked through the glass. Open, closed, open. "Hello?" I tried again. The jukebox hummed louder, as if in reply. I walked to the counter. A coffee cup sat on a saucer. Steam curled up from it, thin and pale. I stared. The steam stuttered. Not stopped, just skipped, before continuing. "Anyone working?" I asked. My voice cracked. A door opened at the back. A woman stepped out, white uniform. A name tag rubbed smooth. Age hard to guess, 30, maybe 50. The light treated her kindly, too kindly. She smiled, familiar, practiced. "Rough night?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, my voice hoarse. "Fuel's low." I got lost. "Happens," she said. Her tone made it sound harmless. "Sit anywhere." I slid onto a stool at the counter. She poured coffee without asking. Black, steaming. The cup warmed my fingers the same way the door handle had. "Thanks," I muttered. The first sip hit me hard. It tasted like nights when the world had almost felt safe. "Kitchen's open," she said. "Burger, eggs, hash. Pie if you want." "What kind of pie?" I asked. "Apple." The word cut into me, a memory I hadn't invited. My mother, long gone, in a kitchen filled with flour and light. Her fork tapping vents into a crust. I swallowed too hard. The coffee burned my throat. "You okay?" she asked, tilting her head. "Long day," I said. "Longer night." "Storm like this makes the road longer," she said softly. "I didn't see any stations for miles," I said. "No exits." "They come and go," she answered, "but we're always here." Her words sat heavy in my chest. "Burger," I said quickly. "Fries, please." "Good choice." She lifted the shelf to the kitchen. Bright light poured out, too strong, too alive. "One burger, one fry," she called into the glow. The shelf clanged shut. The light vanished. "You'll want gas after," she said, almost casually. "There's a pump out back." "Is it working?" I asked. "It does what it needs to," she said, and she smiled again. I looked down at my phone. A grey map. A blue dot blinking in the middle of nowhere. The time said 11:59. I frowned. I was sure it had been after midnight. "You serve all night?" I asked, not looking up. "All night," she said. When I raised my head, she wasn't behind the counter anymore. She was across the room, straightening the salt shakers on a booth table. "We get who the road sends," she said. The kitchen bell rang. A plate slid under the pass, a burger and fries. I picked it up. It was cut the way my mother used to cut it. Halves, then one half again. Diagonal, easier for a child to hold. I hadn't told her that. "Good?" the waitress asked. "Yeah," I whispered. "It's perfect." The jukebox restarted the same song. I ate. I told myself I'd ask about the pump. I told myself I'd get back on the road. Outside, the neon blinked patiently. Inside, the clock above the register read 11:59. The second hand didn't move. I kept eating. The burger sat heavy in my stomach, warm, familiar, too familiar. Every bite tasted like a memory I hadn't chosen to relive. When the plate was empty, I pushed it away and wrapped my hands around the coffee cup again. It was still hot, as if it had just been poured. The waitress was gone. I hadn't seen her leave. One moment she was by the booths, straightening napkin holders, and the next, nothing. No footsteps. No door swinging shut. Just absence. I cleared my throat. "Hello?" The jukebox answered, its needle scratching into the same melody. The tune skipped a bar, looped, and began again. My stomach tightened. I slid off the stool and walked toward the booths. My shoes squeaked against the linoleum, too loud in the silence. I expected to find her somewhere, taking an order, carrying a plate, anything. But the booths were empty, all of them. That was when I noticed the people. They were there all along, I realized. How had I missed them? Scattered across the room, hunched over plates, hands folded on tables. Their clothes looked old-fashioned, out of style. A man in a suit from the 70s. A woman in a floral dress that looked like it belonged to my grandmother's wardrobe. They sat perfectly still, except for their eyes. And their eyes? Cloudy, grey, unfocused. Some blinked, some didn't. One man muttered the same words under his breath, again and again, too low for me to make out. My skin crawled. "Evening," I said, forcing my voice steady. No reply. A fork slipped from a woman's hand. It clattered onto her plate. She didn't pick it up. She didn't even look down. I swallowed hard and stepped back. My heart raced, telling me to get out, to walk straight back to my car, to the storm, to anywhere else. But outside was no safer, I knew that. I'd seen the cars, I'd seen the way time itself refused to move. Maybe they're just tired, I whispered to myself, my voice shaking. Travelers like me, just travelers. But I didn't believe it. I turned toward the counter, meaning to leave a bill, to shout for the waitress, to do anything that felt normal. That's when I saw the clock. It hung above the register, big and round, its glass face smeared with fingerprints. The hands pointed to 11:59. They hadn't moved since I came in. They hadn't moved at all. I stared, waiting for the second hand to tick forward, even a fraction. It didn't. The air thickened, heavy in my lungs. A voice broke the silence. "You get used to it." I spun around. One of the men at the back booth had lifted his head. His eyes were clearer than the others, almost normal. His face was pale, sharp with shadows. He looked younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, but there was something about him that made me think he'd been here far longer. "What?" I asked. "The clock," he said. His voice was low, tired. "Don't bother watching it. It's always the same. Always before midnight I stared at him, throat dry. What is this place?" His lips twitched, something between a smile and a grimace. "You'll figure it out." I wanted to demand answers, but the way he looked at me, like someone who had already said it 100 times to 100 different people, made my words die in my mouth. Instead, I asked, "How long have you been here?" His gaze drifted toward the window, toward the neon glow. "Long enough," I shivered. "I just need gas. Then I'll be gone." He chuckled, and the sound made my stomach drop. "That's what they all say." My skin prickled. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, his eyes glinting in the jukebox light. "Nobody leaves, friend. Nobody ever leaves." Before I could reply, the kitchen door swung open again. The waitress walked out, smiling as if nothing had changed. She wiped her hands on her apron and said, "Pump's ready for you." Out back. Her voice was calm, too calm. I turned back toward the booth. The man was gone. The seat was empty. Only a half-full glass of water remained, beads of condensation rolling down its side. My chest tightened. I looked at the waitress. She tilted her head. "Something wrong?" "No," I said quickly. "Just tired." "Storms do that," she said. "Finish your coffee. Then I'll show you to the pump." I nodded, though my hands shook. I raised the cup to my lips. The coffee was still hot, still fresh. I glanced at the clock again. 11:59. It hadn't moved. The clock above the counter still read 11:59. I don't know how long I'd been staring at it. Seconds, minutes, maybe longer. My coffee sat cooling in front of me, untouched. The jukebox played the same song, looping the same bar over and over, as if the needle refused to move. I stood and stepped closer to the clock. The second hand hovered between two marks. I waited, 10 seconds, 20, 30. It didn't budge. "Come on," I whispered, my voice cracked in the stillness. "Just move." It didn't. A nervous laugh escaped me, too sharp, too loud. "Fine. Maybe the battery's dead. Maybe it's broken." But when I checked my phone, the truth hit harder. The screen lit up, a grey map with that lonely blue dot blinking in the middle of nowhere. And above it, the time, 11:59. I stared, closed the app, reopened it. Same thing. I tapped the side of the phone like that would help. 11:59. I checked the lock screen, 11:59. The seconds didn't change. My throat tightened. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, as if hiding it would undo what I'd just seen. Okay, I muttered to myself, so the clocks are wrong. All of them, big deal. But my voice shook. At the far booth, a man in a grey hat whispered the same phrase again and again. I couldn't hear the words, just the rhythm, steady, mechanical. Another woman tapped her spoon against a coffee cup without ever lifting it to her lips. A teenager stared at a plate of pancakes, steam rising though he hadn't taken a single bite. The food looked fresh, too fresh. I stepped closer, drawn against my better judgment. The pancakes glistened with butter. Syrup dripped down the side in slow motion. The smell was sweet, warm. But when I leaned in, the boy's cloudy eyes shifted toward me. I flinched back. "Sorry," I whispered, though I didn't know why. He didn't blink, didn't move, just watched me with eyes that weren't really eyes. The jukebox popped, the sound warping like a cassette chewed by old gears. The song started again from the beginning. Something in me snapped. I couldn't just stand there. I needed to leave. I turned, heading for the door. My shoes squeaked too loudly. My breathing came shallow, quick. Every step felt heavier, like the air itself didn't want me to move. The neon glowed through the glass. Open. Always open. My hand gripped the door handle. Warm again, as if someone had just touched it. I pushed. The door gave way. Cold rain slapped my face. The storm was still raging outside, as furious as when I'd first arrived. I stumbled onto the lot, desperate for the sting of real air, for proof that time still moved out here. But the sight froze me in place. The cars. I could have sworn there had been dozens of them before. Different colors, different models. Now there were fewer, rows missing. The spaces looked darker, emptier, but slick puddles still reflected headlights that weren't there. And at the very front row, nearest the neon glow, sat a car I knew too well. Mine. Silver, wet with rain, engine off, driver's seat empty. I blinked. My keys were still in my pocket. My car was behind me, wasn't it? I turned, searching the lot. Nothing, just rows of dead vehicles, lined in silence. The silver car gleamed back at me, waiting. "No," I whispered. My hand trembled on the doorframe. "That's impossible." I backed inside, chest heaving. The door shut behind me with a soft click. The jukebox hummed the same song. The diners hadn't moved. I pressed my palms to the counter, forcing breath into my lungs. "I'm losing it," I told myself. "That's all. Just tired, just hungry, just losing it." "You're not losing it." The voice came from behind me. I turned sharply. It was the same man who'd spoken before, the one who had told me nobody leaves. Now he sat at the counter, just 2 stools away, though I hadn't seen him come in. His eyes were clearer than the others. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked quietly. I swallowed. "Saw what?" "The car. Your car." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You understand now." My lips parted, but no words came. He tapped a finger on the counter. "This place, it isn't on a map. It isn't anywhere. Once you're here, you're here." That's not possible," I said. He almost smiled. It wasn't possible for me either. Until it was, I backed away from him. "I'm leaving. I don't care what you say, I'm leaving." He didn't argue, he just sipped from a cup of coffee that hadn't been there a moment before. "Try," he said softly. "We all do." At first, the jukebox popped again. The song reset. I stood frozen, heart pounding. The man lowered his cup, his eyes steady on mine. "Look at the clock," he whispered. I turned. Above the register, the clock read 11:59. My phone buzzed faintly in my pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands. The lock screen glowed. 11:59. I felt the weight of it then, the truth pressing down on me like the storm outside. Time wasn't moving, not for me, not for anyone here. The man's voice was barely audible now. Welcome to the Roadhouse. I told myself I'd just drink the coffee, pay, and get out. That was the plan. Simple, logical. But when I turned from the counter, I saw them more clearly than before. The guests. They weren't eating. Not really. Some sat with forks poised in mid-air, as if frozen. Others stirred coffee that never cooled. A few muttered to themselves, words slipping like broken records. I don't know how I missed them earlier. It was as if they hadn't been there until now. Or maybe they had, and my mind had refused to see. I walked between the booths, trying not to stare. The closer I looked, the stranger they seemed. A man in a faded suit leaned against the window, his tie knotted too tight. His lips moved slowly, repeating the same phrase. Almost time. Almost time. Almost time. A woman in a floral dress sat upright, her hair styled in stiff curls from another decade. She didn't blink, her chest didn't rise. She just watched the rain through the glass, eyes fogged like smoke. My throat went dry. I told myself they were travelers, maybe tired, maybe half asleep. But that lie cracked the moment I saw the kid. He couldn't have been more than 12. Freckles, curly hair damp with sweat. He sat before a plate of fries, golden and steaming, untouched. His lips trembled as he whispered, "Don't go outside. Don't go outside." The words burrowed into me. "Hey," I said, my voice soft. "You okay?" He didn't answer, didn't look at me, just whispered the phrase again. My stomach knotted. I turned, ready to walk away, and froze. In the corner booth, half hidden in shadow, sat a woman I recognized. My chest locked up. No, it wasn't possible. Her hair was pulled back the same way, her smile faint but knowing. She wore the same cardigan she'd worn on the last day I'd seen her alive. My mother. I blinked hard. It couldn't be. She was gone. Years gone. But when her eyes met mine, I felt 12 again. She tilted her head and whispered, "Eat while it's warm, Jackie." The world tilted. My knees almost buckled. "No," I muttered, backing away. "No, you're not real." She just smiled, repeating the same words. "Eat while it's warm." The jukebox cracked, the song skipping again. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the counter to keep steady. I didn't want to look at the other booths, but my eyes betrayed me, and I saw more faces. Not strangers, not anymore. An old friend from college, pale and stiff, staring down at an empty glass. A co-worker I hadn't thought about in years, lips parted in a half smile. Even a neighbor from childhood, eyes blank, hair dripping as if she'd just stepped out of the rain. Everywhere I turned, people I knew. People I'd lost. People who were supposed to be buried in the past. My heart slammed against my ribs. "This isn't real," I whispered. "This isn't happening." "You see them now." The voice was behind me. I spun around. The man with the clear eyes, the only one who seemed alive, sat 2 booths away. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, watching me with quiet interest. "What are they?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Not what, who?" He gestured at the still figures. "They were like you." Once I shook my head. No, that's impossible. I know some of them. They're dead." His smile was bitter. "Exactly." The air thickened, pressing against me. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all I managed was a hoarse whisper. "Why am I seeing them?" "Because you're already halfway here," he said. I stumbled back, knocking into a chair. The legs screeched against the floor. Every head in the diner turned toward me at once. Dozens of cloudy eyes, watching, waiting. My chest seized. I couldn't breathe. The man in the booth leaned back, folding his arms. "The Roadhouse shows you what you need to see, what keeps you in your seat. Some stay because of guilt, some because of love. Others because they don't even know they're gone. Gone? The word barely left my lips. He didn't answer. Instead, my mother's voice floated across the room again, calm, soft, impossible. Eat while it's warm, Jackie. I clamped my hands over my ears. Stop it, I shouted. You're not real. The jukebox shrieked, the record scratching loud enough to make me wince. And then silence. All the diners sat motionless, heads tilted toward me. The waitress emerged from the kitchen, smiling as if nothing had happened. She carried a plate with a slice of apple pie, steam curling from the crust. She set it on the counter in front of me. On the house, she said sweetly. I stared at it. The smell hit me instantly. Cinnamon, sugar, butter. My throat closed. It was the same pie, the same as home. I couldn't move. The waitress tilted her head. Something wrong? I forced a breath. Why are they here? Why am I seeing them? Her smile didn't waver. Because you're supposed to. I backed away from the counter, shaking my head. No, I whispered. I'm not staying here. I'm not. The man with the clear eyes watched me calmly. We all said that, at first. The jukebox started the song again, soft and steady. I turned toward the door, desperate to escape those cloudy eyes, desperate to escape her smile. My mother's voice echoed in my head. Eat while it's warm, Jackie. And I ran before I had to hear it again. I ran from the booths, from their cloudy eyes, from her voice that wasn't her voice. By the time I reached the counter, my chest ached and my legs trembled. The jukebox had settled back into its soft loop, calm as if nothing had happened. But the pie was still there. Steam curled from the crust, golden and flaking, dusted with sugar. Cinnamon filled the air, rich and sweet. I didn't have to taste it to know. I knew exactly what it was. It was hers, the last thing my mother ever baked. Apple pie, the way only she made it. Spiced too heavily, crust a little uneven, but perfect because it was hers. I shook my head. No, I whispered. That's not possible. The waitress smiled gently, wiping her hands on her apron. On the house, she said again, like a song she had sung too many times. My hands clenched into fists. How do you know? Know what? Her smile didn't falter. This pie, it's exactly what she made that night. My voice cracked. How do you know that? Her eyes didn't blink. Because you're supposed to eat it. I staggered back. The booths creaked softly, and for a heartbeat I thought the guests were leaning closer, listening. But when I looked, they were still, frozen in their endless poses. The man with the clear eyes was gone again, his booth empty. A ring of water on the table where his cup had been. I stared at the pie. I remembered that night, my mother in the kitchen, humming to herself, flour on her hands. I remembered laughing, stealing a slice before it cooled, her mock anger melting into a smile. I remembered how warm it had felt, safe, and I remembered the phone call the next morning, the kind of call that breaks something in you forever. The smell in front of me was identical, perfect. It reached inside me, pulling memories out whether I wanted them or not. I won't eat it, I said aloud. I won't. The waitress tilted her head. Of course you will. Everyone does. I backed away another step. My heel caught on the leg of a chair and it screeched against the floor. Every head in the diner turned toward me again. 100 cloudy eyes all at once. My breath hitched. The boy with the fries whispered louder now, voice hoarse. Don't go outside. Don't go outside. The woman in the floral dress finally blinked, slowly, and my mother's voice came again, soft as ever. Eat while it's warm, Jackie. Tears stung my eyes. I shook my head furiously. Stop it! You're not her! The jukebox scratched, the record stuttering, then righted itself. The pie still steamed, the smell still wrapped around me like a noose. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I grabbed it desperately, as if it could anchor me. The screen lit up grey. 11:59. Always. I hurled it onto the counter. This isn't real, I screamed. None of this is real. For a moment, silence. Then the waitress leaned closer. Her smile softened, almost kind. "It's real enough, Jack." The sound of my name made my stomach twist. "How do you know my name?" "We've always known," she said. Her eyes glinted in the dim light. "The road brings who it chooses." I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the plate, the heat of it burning my palms, and flung it across the diner. It shattered against the wall, crust and filling sliding down in a wet smear. The jukebox screamed, the speakers bursting with static. Every diner's head turned sharply, in perfect unison, eyes fixed on me. My breath came ragged, panicked. The waitress didn't move, didn't flinch. She just smiled wider. "You can throw it," she said calmly, "but it will come back." I turned, heart pounding, eyes darting toward the door. The neon glow bled through the glass. Open, always open. I stumbled forward, shoving the door wide. Rain crashed onto me, icy and relentless. And then I froze. The pie sat on the hood of my car, whole, steaming, perfect. My throat closed. I staggered back inside. The booths creaked again as I entered, though none of the guests had moved. The waitress stood behind the counter, another plate in her hand, setting it down exactly where the first had been. Apple pie, fresh, waiting. The smell filled the room. "Why?" My voice broke. "Why are you doing this to me?" "Because this is where you belong," she said. "No," I whispered. "I don't belong here." The man with the clear eyes reappeared, sitting now at the far end of the counter, sipping from his cup as if nothing had happened. He looked at me, calm, tired. That's what we all said. The jukebox started the song again. The pie steamed, and every clock still read 11:59. I couldn't take the smell of the pie anymore. The cinnamon, the sugar, the butter, it wrapped around me like chains. My mother's voice still echoed in my skull, soft, insistent. "Eat while it's warm, Jackie." I stumbled backward toward the door. The waitress watched me calmly from behind the counter, her smile unchanged, as if none of this mattered. As if my panic was part of the routine. "I'm leaving," I muttered, more to myself than to her. She tilted her head, eyes bright in the dim light. "Everyone tries." I pushed through the door. The storm slammed into me instantly. Rain like needles, wind howling in my ears. I sprinted across the lot, water splashing up around my shoes. The neon glow flickered against the wet pavement, chasing me like a predator. I reached my car and yanked the door open. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the keys. I jammed them into the ignition and turned. The engine roared to life. For a second, relief surged through me. I slammed the gear shift into drive and hit the gas. The tires squealed on the wet pavement, spinning before catching traction. The car shot forward, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. The Roadhouse shrank in my rearview mirror. The neon sign flickered one last time, then vanished behind the storm. "Good," I whispered, gripping the wheel so tight my fingers ached. "Good. Just keep going, just keep going." The highway stretched empty and endless ahead of me. Water blurred the road, but it didn't matter. I was moving. I was free. Minutes passed, or maybe longer, I couldn't tell. My phone sat on the seat beside me, face up, glowing faintly. The time still read 11:59. I tried to ignore it. Once I find a town, I told myself, once I see another light, another car, anything, this will make sense. It'll all make sense. I drove faster. The rain hammered harder, as if trying to push me back. The tires hissed, the engine strained, but I kept pressing the pedal. Then I saw it, a glow in the distance. I frowned. No, that's impossible. The shape grew clearer through the rain. Neon, red and blue, buzzing against the storm. Roadhouse, open. My stomach lurched. I slammed the brakes, the car fishtailing across the slick asphalt. My chest slammed into the seatbelt, knocking the breath from my lungs. "No!" I screamed. "No, no, no!" But there it was, the same lot, the same sign, the same rows of dead cars, gleaming with rain. I sat frozen, knuckles white on the wheel, breath coming in ragged gasps. My headlights illuminated the wet pavement, cutting across the familiar shapes. The waitress stood in the doorway, smiling, waiting. I gritted my teeth, spun the wheel, and hit the gas again. I tore past the lot, refusing to stop. If I just kept driving, maybe. But the road curved, rain-blind and endless, and after a few minutes the glow appeared again. The same neon, the same sign. I screamed until my throat burned. I turned the wheel hard, aiming off the road into the ditch. The car jolted violently, mud and water splashing over the hood. The tires spun, struggling for grip, before finding purchase. I pushed through, bouncing back onto the asphalt. But the neon was still ahead, always ahead. I slowed, chest heaving. The wheel trembled under my hands. My vision blurred with tears and rain. It was no use. I coasted back into the lot, tires crunching over gravel. The car idled, humming, mocking me. My hands slipped from the wheel. I was shaking too hard to hold on. Through the rain-blurred windshield, I saw the waitress. She hadn't moved. She stood exactly where she had before, in the doorway, smile soft and welcoming. The jukebox played faintly from inside. The same song. Always the same song. I killed the engine. The silence swallowed me. For a long moment I just sat there, forehead against the steering wheel, breath fogging the glass. My mind screamed for me to try again, to run, to fight. But my body was empty, drained. Finally, with shaking legs, I opened the door. Rain poured over me, plastering my hair to my forehead. I walked back toward the neon glow, each step heavier than the last. The waitress held the door open. "Welcome back, Jack," she said softly. The sound of my name froze me. My stomach turned to ice. How do you know my name?" I whispered. Her smile didn't falter. "We've always known." I stumbled inside, dripping water onto the linoleum. The door clicked shut behind me. The warmth wrapped around me again, suffocating. The booths creaked. Every head turned toward me, cloudy eyes burning through the dim light. The jukebox started the song over. The clock above the counter read 11:59, and I knew I wasn't going anywhere. The warmth of the Roadhouse clung to me like damp wool. My clothes dripped onto the linoleum, each drop loud in the silence. The waitress had vanished again, 1 second at the door, welcoming me back, and the next gone. I staggered toward the counter, forcing breath into my lungs. The jukebox hummed the same melody, the record needle caught in its loop. The clock above the register glared down at me. 11:59. Always. I sat on a stool, pressing my wet palms against the counter. My body trembled, but not from the cold, from the realization. There was no leaving. "You'll make yourself sick like that," a voice said behind me. I turned sharply. The waitress stood there, holding a towel. She handed it to me, smiling the same soft smile she always wore. Her apron was spotless, her collar neat, her hair pinned with care. She looked as though she'd stepped out of a photograph. My throat felt dry. I tried to leave. Her eyes softened. "Of course you did. They all do." I gripped the towel, but it didn't feel right. The fabric was stiff, brittle, as if it had been washed and dried 1,000 times too many. I set it aside, staring at her hands. That's when I noticed them. The skin, scarred, pale patches like old burns, twisted into ridges. She tried to hide them under her sleeves, but the fabric slipped when she moved. I forced myself to ask, "What happened to your hands?" She looked down as if she hadn't heard me. Then she smiled again. "Coffee?" "No," I said quickly. "No coffee. Just tell me." "Coffee," she repeated and poured without asking. The steaming cup slid across the counter toward me. Her motions were precise, too precise. Every gesture practiced, rehearsed, perfect. Like an actress in a play that never ended. I pushed the cup away. My stomach churned. The kitchen door banged open. A man emerged, tall and broad, wearing a cook's apron stained with grease. His face was lined, but it was his arms that froze me. Burns, deep scars crawling up from his wrists to his elbows. His hands shook as he carried a plate, but his expression never changed. Blank, detached. He placed the dish on the counter and slid it toward an empty stool. The stool was empty, but the food vanished, just gone, as if someone invisible had taken it. My heart hammered. The cook turned to me, eyes dull, unfocused. His lips parted, and in a flat, lifeless tone he said, "Hash. Eggs. Burger. Pie." I swallowed. "What are you?" He didn't blink, didn't move, just repeated, "Hash. Eggs. Burger. Pie." The waitress smiled at me, her burned hands folded neatly on the counter. "He doesn't talk much," she said sweetly. "What happened to you?" I asked again, louder this time. "Why are you here?" She tilted her head like she didn't understand the question. "Because this is where we belong." "No," I snapped. "That's not an answer." Her smile widened. "Storm like this makes the road longer." I slammed my fists on the counter. "Stop it! Stop saying the same damn things." The jukebox screeched, the song warping for a moment before snapping back into place. The diners in the booth stirred, heads twitching toward me. Their cloudy eyes glinted faintly in the dim light. I turned back to the waitress. She hadn't moved. She just watched me with that endless smile. "You're trapped too, aren't you?" I whispered. Her eyes flickered. For the first time, the smile faltered. Just a crack. Enough. "You're not here because you want to be," I pressed. "You're stuck. Just like the others, just like me." Her lips trembled. The smile almost broke. But then the cook slammed the order window shut, the clang echoing through the room. The sound made her stiffen, her smile snapping back in place. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice flat now, hollow. I pushed away from the counter, heart pounding. "No, no coffee." The diners watched me silently, their cloudy eyes following my every move. The boy with the fries whispered again, "Don't go outside. Don't go outside." I backed toward the booths, trying to put distance between myself and the counter. The waitress stood perfectly still, her burned hands folded neatly, her smile plastered on like paint. The cook vanished back into the kitchen, the door swinging shut behind him. The man with the clear eyes appeared at a booth near the back. He leaned forward, whispering urgently, "Now you see, they're not people anymore. Not really. They serve too long. The Roadhouse keeps them because it needs them, just like it'll keep you." I shook my head. "No, I'm not staying here. I'm not ending up like them." He gave me a look of deep pity. "You already are." My knees weakened. I staggered back, bumping into a table. A plate of pancakes sat there, steam rising. Fresh, untouched. The waitress's voice floated across the room, calm and sweet. "Sit down, Jack. It's almost time." I turned toward her. "Almost time for what?" Her smile widened. "Midnight." My heart stopped. I looked at the clock above the register. 11:59. Always 11:59. I couldn't stand another second under the clock's glass stare. 11:59 crawled over my skin like a rash. The waitress's smile held me in place. The cook's burned arms haunted my peripheral vision. If the car couldn't get me out, then my feet would. "I'm taking a walk," I said to no one and everyone, voice thin and shaking. "Just air." No one stopped me. No one moved. The door handle was warm again, like a pulse. I pushed into the rain. The storm hadn't tired at all. It hit me like a wall, needles of cold threading through my clothes in an instant. The neon bled across puddles. Roadhouse, open, its glow writing itself into the water and tearing it apart with every drop. I didn't look at the lot. I didn't look at my car. I kept my eyes on the highway, on the band of wet black that leapt out of the darkness and vanished into more darkness. I started walking. At first, I counted steps just to keep from thinking. 50, 100, 200. The rain blurred the world to 3 colors, Asphalt, white line, the occasional reflective stud that blinked like a drowned star. Wind clawed at my jacket and shoved me sideways. My shoes filled, sloshing with each stride. My breath came hard, loud in my ears, louder than the storm, louder than sense. I checked my phone without stopping. Grey map, blue dot in the middle of nowhere. 11:59. Always. I shoved it back into my pocket and kept moving. The highway shoulder was a river. I walked in the lane when I thought I could get away with it, hugging the middle where the water was less eager to swallow me. No headlights came. No taillights went. I was the only moving thing, and even I wasn't sure I was moving at all. To prove it, I started marking the distance. I palmed a wet bolt I'd found near the lot and dropped it beside a reflective post. 50 steps later, a strip of duct tape peeled off a shredded tire. I wrapped it around a second post. A mile, I told myself. 2, 3. I didn't know. Time had no teeth here. It couldn't bite. It couldn't leave marks. But the road did. Skid scars crossed both lanes in a long black S. Rubber melted into tar. 100 feet later, glitter in the gutter. Tiny knives of safety glass. I bent without thinking and touched a shard. It was cold and smooth and wicked. Rain cleaned the blood before it could bead in my fingertip. Farther on, I saw a gouge where something heavy had taken a bite out of the guardrail. The rails bent like a ribcage punched inward. I told myself it was old. I told myself it was somebody else's story. I kept walking. The rain grew meaner, blowing sideways. The white line stuttered. The studs blinked and didn't. The wind shoved my hood off and slapped it back again. My hands went numb. My jaw chattered. I laughed at that, a small, stupid sound swallowed by the storm. I passed a weather-beaten sign with no words left on it, just the ghost of letters you could only read if you remembered them. I didn't. Beyond it, a billboard rose out of the dark like a shipwreck. Its paper hung in ragged scales, and beneath the tears was an older ad. Then an older one, then, God help me, a smiling woman in an apron lifting a pie from an oven. Apple, cinnamon steam painted in cheerful cartoon swirls. Not yours, I said through my teeth, not hers. The road dipped and rose. I dipped and rose with it, a metronome set to panic. I wanted to believe I was far away now, that the neon couldn't possibly reach me here. I wanted to believe the rain was washing me clean. Then the glow came back, a sore red pulse against the dark, a blue sigh beside it, far ahead and exactly where it had been before. I stopped walking. The rain didn't. It marched through me. The glow didn't waver, didn't care. It just waited. No, I said. The word barely made it past my throat. No, no. I moved again, faster now, not toward the light but toward the dark between us, as if I could outrun the idea of it. The highway curved, a long, patient bend. The billboard with the pie appeared to my left again, then the wordless sign, then the rip of guardrail, then the safety glass glittering like frost. I broke into a run. Water slapped my shins. My shoes sucked at the road and tried to hold me. The studs flashed like a heartbeat I didn't own. I ran until my lungs turned raw and my legs went numb. I ran past my bolt, past the duct tape, past the reflective post I'd sworn I'd left behind me miles ago. The neon didn't get closer, it didn't get farther, it simply was. I stopped, buckled over, hands on my knees, stomach threatening to climb out of me. The storm laughed with a fresh gust that sliced through my jacket and rearranged my bones. When I lifted my head, the Roadhouse was directly ahead, exactly where I had left it, exactly where it had always been. The lot spread wide, the cars glistened, the neon blinked, open, open, open. No, I said again, because the word was all I had. Something moved at the edge of the lot, a figure at the door. The waitress, framed in neon, her silhouette as clean and impossible as a decal on glass. She didn't wave, she didn't call out. She simply stood, the way a lighthouse stands, unhelpful but always there. I looked down at my hands. They shook so hard I thought the bones would chime. To prove I had done something, anything, I checked my phone one more time. The screen woke, grey map, blue dot, 11:59. A droplet crawled under the glass and smeared the light. "Please," I said, to the road, to the rain, to anything that had ears. "Please." The boy's voice from inside the Roadhouse floated to me, thin as thread and somehow clear through the storm. "Don't go outside. Don't go outside." "I'm outside," I told him, and laughed, and the laugh sounded like a sob with its throat cut. I cut across the lot because there was nowhere else to go. The cars watched me with their wet eyes. A hubcap lay half submerged in a puddle. I fished it out without thinking and saw my face for a second, then lost it in ripples. Another step and something crunched under my heel. I looked down and found a spiderweb of windshield glass ground into the gravel, glittering with neon red. I kicked it away and it didn't go far. Nothing went far here. At the bottom of the diner's steps, I stopped. My breath came in tatters. Water ran into my mouth and out again. The waitress stood exactly as before, close enough now to see her smile, to see the way the rain jeweled on her eyelashes and didn't make them fall. "Back so soon?" she asked. I swallowed. I walked for miles. "You did," she said, with a kindness that made me hate her. "You did so well. Why can't I leave?" The smile didn't change, but something in her eyes did, a flicker of sympathy or a trick of the neon. "Some roads only go one way," she said softly. "You took it." I shook my head until the world blurred. I didn't take anything. I chose wrong exits, that's all. I missed a station. Storm like this makes the road longer, she said, and the line should have sounded like a joke by now, but it didn't. It sounded like a eulogy. Behind her, through the glass, the diners all faced the door. Every cloudy eye, every still mouth. The jukebox's glow washed over them in thin, syrupy layers. The song didn't so much play as exist. "You know my name," I said, because the thought came back, because it hurt less than the other thoughts. "You said it before." She nodded. "Jack." "How?" "The road sends who it chooses." Her voice went quiet enough that I had to lean into the rain to hear it. "And it tells us their names." A bolt of lightning stitched the clouds together and ripped them open. Thunder tumbled after it, shaking the glass in the door. For an instant the lot was daylight, every dent and scar and rust bloom lit like a confession. In that flash I saw the gouge in the guardrail again, clearer than on the highway, as if the road had mirrored itself here. A twisted shine of metal posted near the edge of the lot, a memorial of something that hadn't stopped. I flinched back into the dark. "Come inside," she said, stepping aside just enough to frame the warm amber of the room beyond. "You're drenched. You'll catch your death." The word tangled in my mouth. I swallowed it. She held the door. The jukebox lilted, and for one impossible second, a new voice braided through the melody. Mine, played back from a place I didn't remember speaking. "It'll all make sense. Just keep going." I climbed the steps because there was nowhere else for my feet to go. The door was warm under my palm, the warmth of a thing that had never been cold. As I crossed the threshold, the neon sighed behind me, and the storm became a picture on glass. The room accepted me with its heavy heat. The clock above the register watched with its unsleeping eye. "Welcome back, Jack," the waitress said, not mocking, not triumphant, just inevitable. The kitchen bell chimed. Somewhere a plate slid into place for a person who might or might not have been me. I looked up. 11:59. The door sighed shut behind me, and the storm became a painting, rain pinned to glass, lightning a silent flash. Warmth folded over my shoulders, the smell of coffee and fryer oil pressed close, too familiar, like a hand on the back of my neck. The clock above the register watched me with its one wide eye. 11:59. "Sit," the waitress said softly. "You'll feel better." "I won't," I said, but my legs didn't ask permission. I slid onto a stool, palms braced on the nicked laminate. My hands left damp prints that looked darker than water. For a second, I thought it was the neon tinting the wetness red. For a second, I thought it was blood. The jukebox breathed its loop, one bar that almost broke into chorus and never did. A bell chimed in the kitchen for someone who didn't arrive. He did. The man with the clear eyes appeared at my side as if he'd been standing there the whole time, and I'd just learned how to look. He set a napkin dispenser between us like a truce offering and said, "You ran far." "I walked," I said. "I ran. It didn't matter." "It never does," he said. He took the stool one space away, respectful like a priest in an empty church. "How are the hands?" I stared at them. The skin across my knuckles was raw, grated as if I'd tried to hold onto something that moved too fast. A thin cut smiled across my index finger. Glass, I remembered. On the highway, in the gutter. "I don't know," I said. He nodded at my chest. "Seatbelt?" "What?" He motioned gently. I looked down. A dark line crossed my collarbone, an ache that had been there so long I'd mistaken it for my own bones. I pressed it and felt a deep bruise answer. "You hit hard," he said. "I didn't." I stopped. A brightness clawed at the edge of my memory, the shape of a sound. Brakes screaming because they'd discovered time too late. The smell of something sharp and bitter. Coolant, oil, the chemical ghost of an airbag. A taste like metal. The waitress set a cup in front of me without asking. Steam curled up, innocent as a prayer. "Careful," she murmured. "It's hot." I looked at her hands. The burns shone pale and quiet. "What happened to you?" I asked, and the question sounded small inside my mouth. Her smile didn't break. "Storm like this makes the road longer." "Stop," I said, but softly. I didn't have room to shout. She slid a paper napkin toward me. White dust clung to the edge of the cup, clung to my sleeve where I'd brushed it. Not flour, finer, dry as a lie. Airbag powder. I wiped at it and smeared it worse. The man watched me with patience that hurt. "What is this place?" I asked him. "A trick? A coma dream? Did I hit my head?" He lifted his coffee, and I realized I'd never seen him take a sip. "It's simpler," he said, "and worse." The guests in the booth sat like punctuation marks that never reached an end of the sentence. The boy at the fries had his head bowed, lips still working the same whisper. "Don't go outside." The woman in the floral dress stared at the window as if waiting to find herself on the other side. "You said no one leaves," I said. "But people must. People drive away, Sometimes the road lets them turn around," he said. "Most of us come here because we're not ready to know where we are. Or what we are. We think the road is a place we can still outrun." "What am I?" He didn't answer. The jukebox cracked. The song staggered and started over like a drunk swearing this time it would make it home. The clock ticked without moving. A small noise rose from my jacket pocket. My phone, an obedient pet. I pulled it out. The map was grey. The dot blinked, a heartbeat in a jar. 11:59 shone at the top like a verdict. "You don't have to say it," I told him, though I wanted him to. "Just tell me the rules. Tell me how to cheat." He almost laughed, and the sound wasn't unkind. If there were rules, this would be easier. If there were a trick, we'd all take it. He turned slightly, enough for me to see the thin seam line at his hairline, a scar healed long ago. "I kept trying to count miles," he said. "Kept thinking if I could make the math work, fuel, time, exits, I could make the night let go. It didn't. It isn't that kind of night." "I can't just sit," I said. "I won't. You'll do what you need to until the Roadhouse doesn't need you to anymore." He set the dispenser aside, hands open on the counter like he had nothing to hide. Some of us forget quicker. Some of us don't. The ones who forget are quieter, easier to keep. They become decorations. He nodded at the booths. "And the others?" I asked, hushed. "Sometimes it makes you useful." The kitchen door swung and stopped, breathing heat across the floor. The cook stepped halfway into view. His arms were maps of old fire. His hands shook, then stilled, then shook again. "Useful how?" I asked. The man didn't look at the cook. "You know how a place needs to feel like a place. Tables, chairs, plates, coffee, a smile at the door, a plate you keep meaning to eat, a song that almost begins." He finally met my eyes. The Roadhouse is a mouth. It likes the taste of almost. I swallowed. Almost what? Almost midnight. The clock agreed. 11:59 stared, unblinking. "And the cars?" I said, because I needed to ask about something that wasn't my bones. "Why are they like that?" He smiled without teeth. "We bring them. Or they bring us. Sometimes they show up in the lot before we know they belong to us. Sometimes after." He reached, plucked something off my shoulder, and placed it in my palm. A glitter of safety glass. Neon red found its edges and filled them. "You've been carrying this a while." "I walked past a crash site," I said, "on the highway." He tilted his head. "Did you?" The room breathed. The guests breathed without breath. The waitress wiped an already clean stretch of counter with a cloth that never grew wet. The cook stared through the order window into a kitchen that glowed like a sun he couldn't reach. "What happened to you?" I asked him, "before you came here?" He traced the rim of his cup. "I missed a curve," he said. "Told myself I didn't, but I did. Thought the lights ahead were a town. They were me. They were always me. I gripped the counter until it complained. And then you just stayed." "At first I left every hour. Every minute," he said. "I ran. Drove. Tried the ditch. Tried the median. Tried to wake up. Tried to bleed enough that the night would have to notice." He turned his hands over. Pale scars crossed his palms like old maps. Then I started to listen. To what? He looked at the clock. To what it wanted. I followed his gaze. The second hand hung like a blade. The face held fingerprints, mine among them. "What does it want from me?" I asked. His answer was so quiet I almost missed it. "It wants you to know." A fresh memory uncoiled, not new at all, just finally brave enough to show itself. Headlights becoming a white wall. The wheel light in my hands then torn away. The seatbelt tearing a line across my chest and saving me for a second I never got to use. The smell of powder. The slow turn of the world as if the road had rolled over and I had gone with it. Glass wrote stinging script across my face. Rain applauded everything. "I didn't make it," I said, and the words didn't quite leave my mouth, as if the air had grown thick. The waitress set a plate between us. Not pie this time. A burger cut into halves, then one half into two, a child's geometry. "Eat while it's warm, Jackie," she said, and the way she said it cracked me open. For an instant her face wasn't hers, it wore my mother's patience like a veil. Then it was hers again. The burns didn't move. "I'm not hungry," I whispered. "That's all right," she said. "It'll wait." The man nodded toward the door. "When you're ready," he said, "look in the mirror by the exit." "What mirror?" "You'll see it," he said. "We all do. Sooner or later. Why not now?" My voice sounded like it belonged to the boy with the fries, thin and lost. "Because you still think there's a different door," he said, and his eyes were kind. "You still think there's a sign you missed. A town you almost reached." The jukebox sighed. The song gathered itself and tried the chorus again. Failed, smiled sadly and started over. I slid off the stool. My legs felt taut to walk somewhere. I didn't know if it was the lot or the kitchen or the end of the counter where the napkin dispenser waited like a small square tombstone. "Jack," the waitress said softly, "you're dripping on the floor." I looked down. Water had pooled at my feet, threaded with a thin pink. Neon found it and made it beautiful. "I didn't come here," I said to no one. "I was delivered." The man with the clear eyes nodded. "Welcome," he said, not like a host, not like a jailer, but like someone who had opened a door for me because it was the only thing to do. "When you're ready." I turned toward the exit. The glass held rain that wasn't falling. The neon blinked. Open. The reflection of the room layered over the storm, a double exposure of a night that wouldn't die. Somewhere near the door, not there a moment before, a tall rectangle of silver waited in the wall. Quiet, patient, inevitable. I didn't walk to it, not yet. The clock gave me all the time in the world to decide. 11:59. I stayed at the counter longer than I meant to, hands clamped around the mug the waitress had left for me. The steam curled upward, thinner now, weaker, as if even heat was growing tired of pretending. The man with the clear eyes had slipped away again, leaving behind only a faint ring of moisture on the countertop, proof he'd ever been there at all. I told myself I'd follow him, I'd demand answers, but when I turned toward the booths, the room itself had changed. It wasn't sudden, not a crack of thunder, not a flash of lightning, more like the slow fade of a light bulb, the dimming of a stage set. The walls had grown darker, streaks of shadow bleeding downward like damp rot. The booths sagged, vinyl splitting at the seams. The air thickened with a smell I hadn't noticed before, something sharp, metallic, almost like rusted coins held too long in a sweaty palm. The jukebox still played, but the tune was wrong now. The melody warped, wobbling as if the record had melted and reformed crooked. Each note dragged, sour and bent. The lyrics I swore I'd never heard before slipped under my skin, a half-whispered chant. Stay, stay, stay. My stomach twisted. The diners had changed too. The boy with the fries no longer whispered. His lips hung slack, but his eyes locked on mine. Not cloudy, not dull, burning, hateful, aware. The woman in the floral dress turned her head in one clean mechanical jerk. Her gaze tracked me, unblinking. One by one they all shifted. Forks scraped, cups rattled, and every single one of them turned their faces toward me. The sound of their chairs moving in unison made my skin crawl. I stumbled back toward the counter. The waitress appeared from nowhere, standing closer than before. Her hands, burnt, scarred, rested calmly on the edge of the counter as if nothing had changed. "What's happening?" My voice cracked. She smiled, gentle as ever. "You're starting to see." "See what?" Her eyes glinted in the dim light. "What you really are." The floor vibrated faintly, like something massive moved beneath it. Plates trembled on tables. A fork slid off and clattered onto the linoleum, but no one looked down. They just watched me. I turned toward the door. The glass fogged from inside, thick enough to blot out the storm. Only the faintest glow of neon leaked through, a wounded pulse. I grabbed the handle. Warm, always warm. I yanked, but the door didn't budge. It felt fused to the frame, a part of the wall now. "Let me out," I hissed. The waitress tilted her head. "Out?" She laughed softly, kindly, like a teacher correcting a child. "You've been out for a long time." I slammed my shoulder into the door. Pain shot through me. The door stayed shut. Behind me, the jukebox stuttered. The music stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the song. Then, voices, all of them. Every diner spoke at once, their mouths moving in jerks and twitches. The sound was layered, chaotic, words tangled together but carrying the same meaning. "Stay, stay, stay." I clapped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The chant wasn't sound, it was in the air itself, in the pulse of the room, vibrating in my teeth. The waitress leaned closer, her breath warm against my ear. "They only want company. Isn't that what you want too?" I shoved away from her. "No, I want to leave." Her smile never faltered. No one wants to leave. Not once they understand. The cook banged open the kitchen door. His bulk filled the frame, apron stained darker now, almost black. He held a cleaver in one scarred hand, and though he didn't move toward me, his presence filled the room like a wall. I backed away, heart slamming. "Stay away from me." The diner's chant rose louder, their heads twitching in unnatural rhythm. "Stay, stay, stay." The lights above flickered, buzzing like dying flies. The pie case cracked across its glass face, a jagged smile. The clock above the register shivered, its second hand twitching but never advancing. Something in me broke. "This isn't real," I shouted. "You're not real." The man with the clear eyes appeared again, this time in the booth nearest the door. He leaned forward, his face grim. "It's real enough," he said, his voice cut through the chant. "And it won't stop until you look." "Look at what?" He nodded toward the exit. I followed his gaze. Beside the door, half hidden in shadow, was something I hadn't noticed before. A tall rectangle, glass framed in tarnished silver. A mirror. My pulse raced. I stepped toward it, but the diner's chant surged louder, filling the air like smoke. My knees buckled under the weight of their voices. The waitress's burned hand touched my shoulder. "Not yet," she whispered. The man shook his head. "Sooner or later, everyone does." The lights flickered one last time and went out. The only glow left was from the jukebox, casting the room in sickly green and blue. Dozens of cloudy eyes burned in the dark, and the mirror waited. The room pulsed with whispers, the air swollen with the weight of voices that weren't voices. My knees trembled as I pressed myself against the counter, eyes locked on the rectangle of glass near the exit. The mirror waited, patient, silent, too still for this place. "Not yet," the waitress had said, but the man with the clear eyes had shaken his head. "Sooner or later, everyone does." The diners chanted in unison now, their cloudy eyes trained on me. "Stay, stay, stay." The words sank into my skin like ink. "I won't," I whispered back. My throat burned. "I won't stay." The jukebox hummed again, picking up its broken tune, softer this time, like a lullaby played through a broken radio. The pie case rattled, the cracked glass vibrating. A fork slid off a table and rang like a tiny bell. I forced myself to move, 1 step, 2. Each felt like wading through water. The mirror loomed larger with every inch. The man watched me from his booth. His eyes, sharp and pained, never left mine. "You'll see," he murmured, "and once you see, you'll stop running." My hand reached for the frame. It was cold, shockingly so, colder than the storm outside, colder than anything I remembered. My breath fogged the glass, but the fog didn't fade. It clung like frost. I leaned closer. At first, I saw only myself. Wet hair plastered to my forehead, jacket soaked, eyes wide with terror. But then the image twitched, like bad reception. My face blurred, melted, shifted. Another version of me stared back. His skin was pale, streaked with dried blood. His forehead bore a shallow cut. His chest was marked with a deep bruise from a seatbelt. Shards of glass glittered in his hair. I stumbled back. No, that's not me." The reflection didn't follow. It stayed pressed against the glass, lips moving, though no sound came. I read them anyway. "You didn't make it." My throat closed. I slammed my hand against the glass. "That's a lie!" The diner's chant rose louder. "Stay, stay, stay." The man with the clear eyes stood now, hands on the table. His voice cut through the noise. "You know the truth, Jack. You've always known." Images crashed through me, the skid marks across the asphalt, the gouged guardrail, the glitter of safety glass under my heel, the smell of airbag powder, the warmth of the seatbelt bruise. "I survived," I whispered. I got out of the car. I walked. The reflection's lips moved again. "You never left." My vision swam. The mirror rippled like water disturbed, and behind my reflection, other faces pressed forward. The boy with the fries, the woman in the floral dress, the man in the suit, all of them crowding the glass, eyes hollow, mouths moving in silence. They weren't behind me, they were inside. I staggered away, clutching my chest. No, I'm alive." The waitress stepped closer, her burned hands reaching out like a mother soothing a child. "Jack," she whispered, "it's almost time." I froze. Time for what? Midnight? Her smile deepened. There is no midnight. There never will be. The clock above the register shivered. Its second hand twitched, jerked forward a breath, and stopped. Always one heartbeat before, always the same. My head shook violently. That's not possible. Time moves, it has to. The cook stepped out of the kitchen, cleaver dangling loosely from his scarred hand. His eyes never met mine. They stared past me, unfocused, like a puppet waiting for its next line. The diners spoke louder, their chant breaking into laughter now, high and wrong. Stay, stay, stay. The man with the clear eyes approached, his steps slow, heavy. He stopped just short of me, his face carved with pity. You fought hard, he said softly, harder than most, but the road only leads one way. My chest tightened, the room tilted. No, I can't be dead. I still feel, I still think, You remember, he interrupted, and memory is the last tether. The Roadhouse feeds on it, shows it back to you until you accept. The jukebox crackled, a low growl of static. For a moment the song warped into a scream, then snapped back into its broken melody. The mirror pulsed again. My reflection pressed its bloody palm against the glass. The words formed once more. You didn't make it. And this time I couldn't look away. Tears blurred my sight. My knees buckled, but the waitress caught me, her scarred hands unexpectedly gentle. It's easier when you stop fighting, she said. The road is long, but the seat is waiting. I tried to speak, but only a sob came out. The man nodded toward the booths. Go on. Find a place. You'll see, sooner or later, the table always has your name on it. The diners watched silently now, their cloudy eyes no longer hateful but expectant. I looked back at the mirror. My reflection smiled faintly, lips cracked, blood drying across its face. Behind it, the others pressed closer, crowding, waiting for me to join them. The clock trembled above the counter. A groan echoed through the walls, through the floor, through my bones. The second hand tried again. It twitched forward, stopped. Always 1 minute before tomorrow, forever. The waitress brushed wet hair from my forehead like a parent settling a fevered child. Rest, Jack, she whispered. It's always almost midnight here. I couldn't hear the storm anymore. The rain was still there, pressed flat against the glass, but the sound of it had thinned to a memory. The room carried its own weather now, low, heavy, and inevitable. The waitress helped me stand. Her scarred hands were steady, guiding without pressure, as if I had already decided and she was only honoring the choice. The man with the clear eyes stepped aside, giving me space with a nod that felt ceremonial. I'm not hungry, I told them, though the words were smaller than the breath that carried them. That's all right, the waitress said. You won't be for long. The booths waited, red vinyl dulled with age, seams split like old mouths. I walked the aisle slowly, passing the boy with the fries, the woman in the floral dress, the man with the too tight tie. Their faces weren't hostile now, not pitying either, just ready, like seats saved in a theater. A booth near the window was empty. The tabletop wore a faint ring where a cup had once lived, and several even fainter ones where time had practiced its circles. Outside, the lot lay glossy and still. In the front row, a silver car shone under the sickly glow of neon. Mine. It had found its place long before I had. Here, the waitress said, and touched the edge of the table with 2 fingertips. This is yours. I slid into the booth. The vinyl sighed under me, as if it recognized my weight. The moment my hands met the table, the tremor in them eased. My chest loosened. Some small tautness that had kept me upright, defiant, just unwound. The man with the clear eyes stood at the end of the aisle, his hands tucked into his jacket like a preacher unsure of his sermon. You made it farther than most before you looked, he said. That's something. It doesn't feel like something, I said. It will, he replied. Then it won't. Then it won't matter. The jukebox released a soft crackle, as if clearing its throat, and started the song again. The needle brushed the groove with a tenderness it hadn't earned. I could almost hear the chorus this time. I could almost remember the part where it should have broken free. The waitress set a cup of coffee on my table. Steam rose, not eager now but patient, like breath in winter. The mug was warm between my palms. I didn't lift it. "What happens next?" I asked. She looked toward the clock without looking at it. "You stay," she said. "You rest. The road stops asking you for things it can't give." "And then?" She softened. "Then the road sends someone else." A pause small enough to miss. "And sometimes, when it needs a hand, it asks kindly. Kindly. To help carry plates. To hold a door, to say welcome." She glanced toward the kitchen, where the cook hovered behind the pass, his burned arms still as photographs. "Some of us were asked a long time ago." "Do you remember, before?" I asked her. She smiled, and for an instant I thought I saw a car's dashboard reflected in her eyes, a wash of headlights, the suggestion of a lullaby on a radio. It faded. "Enough," she said. The man with the clear eyes exhaled through his nose. "Memory lets you sit," he said, "until it gets heavy. Then it unhooks itself and drifts. You won't miss it, not in the way you think." "I don't want to forget her," I said, and I didn't have to name who. The word "her" was enough to lift the cinnamon back into the air, to press flour into the cracks of my knuckles, to make a fork tap tiny vents into a warm crust. Somewhere the world had to be kind. "You won't," the waitress said gently. "You'll just stop needing the sharp edges." The window breathed a fog and released it. Out in the lot, water gathered into a small lake beside my car and then pretended to be glass. The neon wrote its name on it and crossed it out and wrote it again. My reflection lay there without bothering to meet my eyes. I touched the cup. I didn't drink. The heat of it was enough to tell me I was still a shape that could be held. Across the aisle, the boy with the fries raised his head. His mouth stopped forming "Don't go outside" and formed something else instead. I watched closely until I understood. "It's okay." The words looked clumsy, like a language he'd only just learned. The man with the clear eyes cleared his throat. "You'll want to see it once more," he said. "The mirror?" I asked. He nodded. "It won't hurt you this time." I stood. The waitress did not touch me. She didn't have to. The room shaped itself around my path. The diners turned their faces to follow and then, politely, looked away. I stopped before the glass. The frame was colder than bone. My breath rose and didn't fade. The surface did not show the room behind me now. It showed a road that had already happened. Rain, the white scream of headlights, a wheel light in my hands, then not. The bright flower of the airbag. The particular silence that follows a noise so loud it takes the world with it. The man joined me at my shoulder. Our reflections did not quite agree with us. Their edges were too neat, the light too honest. "I told myself 1,000 versions," he said, voice gentle. "Each one a mile longer than the last. In the end, none of them were wrong. They were just all the same story." I watched the other me lift a hand, blood dried to paint, palm open, forgiving. He laid it against the glass. I raised mine. The temperature dropped through my skin into the parts of me that still remembered fear. Our hands didn't meet. They recognized each other anyway. "Okay," I said. That was all. But the word was a key turned in a lock I hadn't seen. Something in the room eased. The chant that had haunted the corners thinned, softened into silence. The clock gave a tiny click, the softest, kindest surrender, but the second hand did not fall. It didn't need to. The waitress stood at the door, not holding it open, not holding it shut, waiting. The cook set a plate on the pass for no one in particular. The jukebox softened the volume on its own, as if it understood that now was a time for whispers. I returned to my booth and sat. The cup waited, warm. I lifted it and tasted. Coffee. Nothing magical, nothing cruel, just coffee. Across the aisle, the woman in the floral dress blinked. Her eyes were less cloudy than before. The boy leaned into his fries and pretended to consider one. The man with the tie loosened it a fraction, enough to steal back a breath. "How long will I sit here?" I asked the man. "As long as you like," he said, "as long as it takes." "And if the road asks kindly?" I glanced at the counter, at the door, at the pass where plates slid into a world that did not include hunger. He shrugged. "Then you'll decide kindly." I nodded. The idea didn't frighten me. It barely felt like an idea, more like weather you accept because your coat is already on. Headlights touched the far edge of the lot then. Not mine, not a trick of neon, but a true pair of lights carving the rain. They floated closer, tentative, grateful to be aimed at anything. The car eased between the rust and chrome and sleep and came to rest near the door, engine ticking, wipers useless. "Another?" I asked, though the answer was already in the room. "Another," the waitress said. We watched through the window. A figure leaned forward in the driver's seat, forehead against the wheel. Then the door opened and the storm tried to take them and failed. The person ran, hunched, jacket pulled tight, the rain hungry for their back. The handle turned. The door breathed. Warm air stretched out its arms. I expected the waitress to speak first, to say the words I had come to fear and then to need, but she looked at me instead. "Would you like to?" she asked. My mouth opened, then closed. The man with the clear eyes gave me the smallest nod, and it wasn't permission, it was recognition. I stood. My knees didn't wobble this time. I walked to the door and found it warm, not because of the neon or the friction of hands, but because the room had decided it should be. I pulled it wide. Rain smelled like iron and cold, and a story already told. The person on the threshold lifted their face, and in the brief wash of light, I saw the look I must have worn, the look of someone who has driven too far to be anywhere. "Welcome," I said, the word simple, honest. It fit in my mouth like it had been there the whole time. "Come in, you're safe from the storm." They stepped past me, blinking at the heat. The diner took them the way a harbor takes a ship. Behind us, the storm pinned itself back to the glass. The jukebox remembered the first bar of the song and played it without apology. I let the door fall shut. The mirror by the exit reflected a room that had one more person in it than before. The clock watched without malice. The second hand held its breath, as always, just before the world begins again. I returned to my booth. The cup was still warm. Outside, on the front row of the lot, a silver car had fogged its windows from the inside and then politely cleared them. The waitress moved down the aisle with a plate in her hands. The cook, patient as gravity, slid another into place. The man with the clear eyes sat opposite the newcomer and said something I couldn't hear because the song had reached the part where it almost opens its throat. I closed my eyes for a moment and listened to the almost. When I opened them, I lifted my cup in a small salute to the window, to the rain, to the road that had delivered me, and then stopped asking. The neon blinked. The room breathed. The night held. And somewhere, just to the left of time, the Roadhouse kept its promise. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and come back for more mysterious stories.